Now, before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which I'm on. I'm currently in Dili, in a country called Timor-Leste, otherwise known as East Timor. Now, before we get into this conversation that I'm very much looking forward to with Dr. Stephen Kelly, I'd like to speak a little bit about the DSAA, the Development Studies Association of Australia. We're quite a new association. We've been operating approximately 5 years now, and the association is intended to include people who are working in the area of global development and other forms of development in different capacities. So whether you're working as a practitioner or as an independent researcher, whether you're working as a lecturer within development studies or associated fields, whether you're a student of development studies, we would love to welcome you as a new member if you're interested. So we will make sure that in the comments to this webinar, we include the website for DSAA, and you can go and check out what we do and see if you're interested. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our speaker, the main man of the day. Dr. Stephen Kelly is a proud Nanda Man from the Murchison region in Western Australia's Midwest. He's a senior lecturer and coordinator of Aboriginal Studies in the School of Social Inquiry at La Trobe University. And he has experience spanning NGOs, government, and academia. Dr. Kelly completed his PhD at Curtin University in 2017, exploring his family's deep connection to kin and country, and later held a 4-year Indigenous postdoctoral research fellowship at the University of Melbourne. His work champions Indigenous-led, community-based research grounded in cultural respect and self-determination, and he is the author of A First Nations Perspective, Stories of Nanda Resilience, as told by Nanda elders, and he continues to work closely with Nanda and Yamatji communities. So welcome, Steve.
Hi, thank you, Deb. First and foremost, I'd like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri of the Kulin Nations, of which land I'm actually working and living on here in Melbourne. And I just think I'll head over and start to share now, because I've got some nice slides that I'd like to share with everyone, and just thank you for everyone for joining me. How's that? Is that on? Not yet? There? Beautiful. Thumbs up. We love it. Okay, so I'll just start moving to the next slide, basically, and do a bit of an intro. I'll talk you through my PhD process, the methodology and methods that I chose, and we'll break out into some other things in relation to community-based research and how that has impacted on myself, my community, while I was doing other outputs within the academy. My PhD was research was obviously on my own family group, my mob, who are originally come from the Murchison region, and the methodology I actually chose with my PhD was basically qualitative research, and it's best explained by Lion Patong and Easy in 2005 in this statement. In general, qualitative research draws on an interpretive orientation that focuses the complex and nuanced process of the creation and maintenance of meaning. So qualitative researchers, as explained by Denson and Lincoln, deploy a wide range of interconnected interpretive practices. We deploy a wide range of interconnected and interpretive practices, hoping always to get a better understanding of the subject matter at hand. A qualitative research approach allowed me as a Nanda person and researcher the space to provide Nanda perspectives and accounts with critical judgment made to ensure the knowledge is appropriate for the Western Academy. And I'm reading notes here, so please forgive me. The Indigenous methodology and standpoint theory that I actually worked to in the framework was founded on cultural respect and cultural safety embedded in Indigenous ontology, ways of being, axiology, ways of knowing, ways of doing, and epistemology, ways of knowing. This approach involved contesting a Eurocentrism that supports the beliefs or the belief in superiority of European people over non-European Indigenous peoples, and extends to the lack of recognition or ignorance of Indigenous knowledge systems, ways of knowing, ways of doing from Indigenous peoples. As an alternative to the long-standing prevalence of Eurocentrism, Martin and Mirabupa explained ways of knowing are specific to ontology and entities of land, animals, plants, waterways, skies, climate, and spiritual systems of Aboriginal groups. Knowledge about ontology and entities is learned and reproduced through processes of listening, sensing, viewing, reviewing, reading, watching, waiting, observing, exchanging, sharing, conceptualizing, assessing, modeling, engaging, and applying. It also draws attention to assumptions that maintain the epistemological divide or different ways of knowing that often separates Indigenous and scientific communities, suggesting that this provides important contrasting perspectives. So Wexler et al. Added that these address these divergent worldviews that require attention to alternate epistemologies and knowledge claims that may contribute to building a more accurate scientific model or models. Indigenous methodology permitted me as a Nanda researcher to explain how members of my family group connect to each other and our country as part of a broader Nanda tradition. In this way, Nanda lived experiences was documented from an insider's perspective as opposed to outsider perspectives of ethnographers and historians and the like, whose knowledge has been privileged until relatively recently. By documenting thick description and rich descriptions of everyday Nanda lives, lived experiences, this methodology is part of the struggle of self-determination. Informing this approach are three guiding interrelated principles: resistance as the emancipatory imperative research, political integrity, and Indigenous research, and privileging Indigenous voices. The aim is to decolonise Western research methods so that the research is attentive to Indigenous people's interests and needs, and not simply those of the Western Academy. And I also chose Indigenous standpoint theory as my methodology. So I love doing it. It was a wonderful time. And Nakada's theory argues for the necessity of centering Indigenous experiences and knowledge in academic discourse. This theory emerges from the commitment to understanding the cultural interface, a space where Indigenous and Western knowledge systems meet and interact. Nakada emphasises that Indigenous people have a unique standpoint shaped by their cultural heritage, history, and ongoing connections to their land. So my methods that I chose in doing my research were autoethnography, and as an Indigenous researcher working within my community, autoethnography enabled me to include myself as a historical and cultural subject in this space in a critically reflexive way. While autoethnography is not a specific technique, method, or theory, it colours all three as they are employed in fieldwork. Autoethnography is culturally appropriate because it acknowledges equality as a significant component of Indigenous ways of knowing by asking us to consider epistemological perspectives equally to draw together self, auto, ethno, nation, and graphy, writing together The writing process of autoethnography is believed to be a balancing act that is designed to hold self and culture together, allowing for the autoethnographer the transition between story and context. And I love that. Autoethnography recognises undergoing an analysis of self, other relationships or relations, and was vital in my research. This is because I am a family member, obviously, and the researcher of the Nanda family group of this study focused on which I did. My position, therefore, allowed for ethnography to differentiate itself from culturalism by executing an analysis of self-other relations and what can be learned from this dichotomy as we feel, think, and probe our way towards some kind of understanding. As a method, autoethnography has been used to alleviate a host of issues that surfaced in the 80s within the social sciences and relates to the epistemological incubation, or to theirs. Alice et al. Highlight this stance from the social sciences, saying, for the most part, those who advocate and insist on canonical forms of doing and writing research are advocating for white, masculine, heterosexual, middle, upper class, Christian, able-bodied perspectives. As mentioned earlier, my standpoint and chosen methodology open spaces for alternative accounts and counter-narratives. As a research tool, then, for me, autoethnography is inclusive and differing epistemologies and aims to address social justice and develop social change by engaging Indigenous researchers in rediscovering our own voices as culturally liberating human beings. At the same time, as pointed out by Hayona, 1979, autoethnography, whose roots stem from ethnography, shares some identical methodological problems. In this sense, my own cultural and historical identity is entangled with the family group participating in the research, and I was attentive to these issues throughout the production of my thesis. So the methods I actually followed in data collection, was that I sat with my elders and senior elders now, and we yarned, and we use yarning as a method, and I'll go over that a little bit later on. But the yarns were embedded in Nanda ways of knowing, being, and doing, and began several months before or prior to me enrolling in the PhD program. My journey began with lengthy yarns with my mother, Gladys, rest in peace, who at the time was one of several directors of our native title corporation. And these yarns were pivotal as they gave me insights into the dynamics of my family, obviously, and our corporation and how we were operating. So they all helped with me with completion of my doctoral thesis in the later years. These initial discussions began in early January 2012, and it was through these discussions that it became evident that I would need to inform other of my native title corporation directors, and contact was made over the phone, obviously. So there was a lot of communication back and forth at that time. So out of the initial phone conversations, I was invited to a general meeting in Geraldton in Western Australia, and I took my little family up there and I introduced my wife and my kids, my two children. We had a family get together, a barbecue, very relaxed setting. And I explained to my mob what I was doing, and they were pretty open about it. I don't think any of us really understood how this journey would affect all of us, but that was in the embryonic stages. But anyway, the process going through that and just interacting with my family at that time enabled members and directors the time to digest my request, my proposals, and in the following weeks I received an email of support for the research proposal, and then I actually enrolled into the PhD program. So it was kind of like community first, then into the academic process, which, as we all know, is quite a process in itself. So I enrolled in the PhD in October 2012. I went through the ethics process and obviously with community consultation at the same time. All of this was done simultaneously, so lots of extra work there. But with the ethics, participants were encouraged to proceed with an interview by word of mouth, snowballing with other family members. And after I had followed the above mentioned protocol with family and our native title corporation with the elders who participated in the study, I conducted interviews with a variety of, or from a different variety of ways, and I understood that a lot of the elders were very busy. They had grandkids to look after, all of other family commitments. We have a lot of sorry business, unfortunately. So a lot going on. Elders still work. They are heavily committed into a lot of community events. So time is of essence to them. So I was never pushy or, trying to dictate to them the university guidelines, particularly their times, and knowing full well that we've got a lot going on anyway and a lot of other work we can be doing. So I just worked around into their pace, which was lovely. I did all the legwork going up to my country. I travelled 400 kilometres from Perth to Geraldton and sat with my elders on country at their places whenever they were happy to actually have a yarn with me. So that was really cool. And that leads me into the yarning as a method. I used it as an Indigenous research method to record stories from my senior elders. And I did so intentionally because, it's basically how we communicate and have done for thousands of years. Certainly here in Australia, and Indigenous peoples here obviously have been over-researched and have had to endure culturally inappropriate research methods that have impinged or encroached on their lives, rights and cultural obligations. So such missteps occur because the research paradigm embedded within the academy often neglects culturally appropriate methods in place of their own Western research frameworks and methods. And I was always very mindful of that. As we know, working in community, we need to, walk that fine balance, I guess. So the method of yarning, on the other hand, is an age-old concept, and I've already stated that is central to Indigenous people's learning processes. And Indigenous academics have signalled the significance of Australian Aboriginal method as yarning is utilised in all facets of Aboriginal people's lives. We also understand that Indigenous academics, as Indigenous academics, that within the Indigenous psyche there are spiritual and physical realms. That is, spirit is born from and goes back into place or into a place in country. By using yarning as a method and collating data in the field, I was able to follow both the academic and Indigenous processes to garner rich data on Nanda shared lived experience that provided evidence of Nanda ways of knowing, being and doing. So overall, these methods were utilised and gave explicit examples of Nanda epistemology, ontology and axiology. The yarns elicited from elders' interviews were woven throughout my PhD chapters and delivered, and I delivered examples of Nanda ways of knowing and being by presenting these through the method of yarning. Aboriginal scholars have and do acknowledge this and validate this Indigenous ways of knowing. And Rigney goes on to say that yarning is an essential component to be added to the growing Indigenous methodology. And it's all about growing it. The chosen methods did actually support the narratives from the interviewed members of the Yamatji Nation. An Indigenous framework guided me through the process, and I was very happy with all of that. I also moved into archival documentation, which was really significant for me because I went back to pretty much more early contact with my great-great-great-grandfather. And a lot of that stuff was found in a variety of grey material and literature from books, journals, historical reports, state welfare reports, and obviously police reports. So that was great to get that aspect of it, to do a nice timeline throughout the PhD. So the rights and welfare of all participants was respected throughout this process. Obviously, we're going through ethics. Critical engagement with the literature was vital, was a vital part of corroborating and contesting existing narratives with what we drew from our people's lived experiences. So, and the last method that I used, and probably to a lesser extent, was participant observation. And I chose it because as a method, it incorporated periods of quality time doing field work. So that was kind of like something that just seemed right at the time. So from there, I'm going to move into having a bit of a yarn to you about, if I can get my screen to work. There we go. The community-based outputs, because this is where the fun starts. Once you get through all the actual academic ethics and writing all of that up and going through this process, you can get out and do some really nice things that we all love to do. So I began my postdoctoral fellowship, as Deb pointed out, in April 2019. And I moved back from Perth to Melbourne with my family. And it was around May that I received a phone call from my auntie who worked at Irrawonga Language Centre in Gelton in Western Australia. And my aunt explained that there was a lady looking to name a new species of squat lobster. And I had no idea what that was. So out of interest, I started to, have a bit of a yarn to my auntie and get some feedback and what was she doing? Where was she? What did she want to do? Who was she? And my auntie gave me a whole lot of information and a contact number. And her name was Anna McCallum. And basically I touched base with Anna and she invited me for a coffee up at the museum, Vic Museums, where she was working. So I went up and had a coffee and we were having a yarn and she said, look, I'm doing this and I've got this new species. And I said, yeah, it sounds interesting. And she actually showed me under the microscope this little creature and it was no bigger than my thumb. And I was really enthralled by all of it. I was really excited because I thought, Nanda would love this, particularly young kids, the next generation of. And I mean, I was like a big kid seeing this and just having that opportunity to name it in our own language was, to me, something that really sung for me. So I leapt at that opportunity. And Anna was so respectful and just a lovely human being, so giving. And it was just a lovely collaboration. I actually got back in touch with my auntie back at the language centre and said, look, let's set up this Nanda Language Day, and the rest was taken care of. So I didn't have to do too much work. And that's gold. That was really wonderful for me because, I mean, obviously we're busy doing other research and teaching and everything else. So it was, I'll go to this slide next because this was the actual poster for the Language Day that was put together by Irrawonga, and there was myself there from over here, Uni Melb, and a couple of other linguists came over. And look, it was a wonderful day. We named that Squat Lobster in like an hour or so, and it was great to have all family there. And I'll just give you a bit of a squiz of the family that were involved. This is the mob that showed up. There's my son there carrying on. That's his little niece in the background there, and this is all the old aunties here, nephews, nanas, pops, all of us, and I'm at the background there somewhere. But look, it was a lovely day, and we named this Squat Lobster, and I'll give you a bit of a spiel while I've got this going on here about how this new species of squat lobster came to be, helping to revive an Aboriginal language or Nanda language. And this was taken from an interview that both Anna and I did. So hopefully she won't mind me using her work. I'm sure she won't. So when naming new species, scientists traditionally turn to Latin, but these squat lobsters, to Latin, but with these squat lobsters, Dr. Anna McCullum took a different approach. The Museum's Victoria Research Associate sought out Aboriginal communities to name several species that were discovered during deep sea research surveys off the coast of Western Australia and Tasmania. And I've got a lovely picture here too. So this is my country over here, the red bit here, and this is where, just here, and this is where our squat lobster was picked up and found. So she goes on to say, I thought it was really great to celebrate and use Indigenous language in these names for Australian species, says Dr. Anna McCullum. She's the lead author of a new paper describing 7 new species of squat lobster, and this is part of her PhD, so it was a wonderful time for her. I really wanted to do that with the permission and collaboration of those Indigenous communities. One of these species was named by the Nanda people, traditional landowners of Western Australia's central west coast. Nanda is considered a sleeping language because it is only spoken by a few people. And she goes on to say that she was put in touch with myself, Dr. Stephen Kelly, an Indigenous anthropologist at the University of Melbourne, who was working to revive the Nanda language, and he was really enthusiastic. Of course I would be. Loved it. So she goes on to say that, the actual interview goes on to say that a Nanda man himself, Dr. Kelly, invited her to bring the idea to the Language Day at Bundiara Irrawonga Language Centre in Geraldton in 2019. It's a wonderful opportunity for all because naming anything in Aboriginal language is an awesome honour. That's what I go on to say. And I love this because this was actually done, and I'm over in Melbourne, and that was my birthday, the 2nd of July. So it was a nice birthday present, isn't it? Funny how the stars align. So the community voted on a name for the species and settled on the scientific name of Manada Marajana Kunika. Marajada meaning crawling and Kunika meaning crayfish. My family were over the moon to have this recognition, I go on to say. I think it's a wonderful gesture to acknowledge Nanda people, my people, and allow us the space to drive the bus, so to speak. I also go on to say in the interview that the experience has also led to the development of a program to revitalise the Nanda language. And it's a wonderful initiative that stems from having ownership of something like naming a squat lobster, something so tiny. When you get community involvement and people taking this on board, that is a clear indication of something powerful. I think it needs to be acknowledged. And Anna, obviously, big shout out to Anna. There you go, sis. Needs to be acknowledged for allowing us to have that space. And good on you, because it's all about respect, isn't it? So I also go on to say that I hope the experience serves as a template for future collaboration with traditional landowners. And I know that a lot of research in the past has been very one-dimensional, and it's taken from Aboriginal people and never given back. And this just goes to show what we can achieve when we work together in partnership. And that goes right across the board for Australia as a nation too. I think it's a wonderful concept. Let's all walk together and we can do amazing things. Dr. Stephen Kelly said that. Nice. So not long after the Nanda Language Day, I was contacted by Rosie Satoras, a linguist at Irrawonga, and she asked me if I was interested in collaborating with her on a Nanda revitalisation project, of which, of course, I said yes. And I didn't do too much work. She did all the grunt work with writing up that grant for a local government project. And we were lucky, and I added my 2 cents worth with it, but we picked up a $20,000 grant and we started to do some of these Nanda Language Open Day projects through Irrawonga again, and it was wonderful. So you can see here that it is a celebration of Nanda language, and don't worry about the spelling of it. I spell it N-A-N-D-A. Some spell it N-H-A-N-D-A. Some of it has a T in it, so I don't get too hung up on the spelling. But Kalbarri is my country. It's right up about 400 odd k's north of Jordan along the coast. And so they started to do these sorts of things. And again, that's community getting behind that. So that was really just deadly. And as far as I know, it was going on for a few years. So that was from 2019, the initial Nanda Language Day. And as we can see here, that's 2021. In that time, some of you may or may not have known, we were in lockdown from 2020 here. So I was in lockdown while I was doing the work on this. My mob were taking the reins and just knocking it out of the park. So that's the beauty of that, and that was magic. So where are we now? Finally, we're moving on to the academic outputs, which are very important. We all need to do this. So in 2020, I published my first journal article, and that was great. And then this year, May, I published my book. Now, how it started was back, I just started my postdoc fellowship at Melbourne University. Again, this was all going on simultaneously. And I submitted my PhD manuscript into IATSIS, the Australian Institute of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Studies. And it was shortlisted for the Stanner Award, and I was over the moon. And what they, even though I didn't win it, which is not a problem, I was just stoked to be in the running with it. I was contacted and they asked me if I would be interested in actually working with the editors over at IATSIS to maybe see if we can knock it into a book to publish. And of course I said yes, as we do. So that's been a process since then, since 2019. So none of this has been overnight. It is hard grunt work, but it helps when you do get community involved and allow community to run things the way they want to on their own times too, because like we have as academics and researchers, whatnot, we have to work within the times and the deadlines. Community don't, and they don't have to work within our, oops, phone's going off, sorry. So that's pretty much me, I think. That's been my journey of the magic of community-based research. And I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. And there's lots more to come, I'm sure. But thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Steve. It was a delight hearing about the process, and an absolute delight, I have to say as well, reading your book. One of the things that I loved so much about it was how much of yourself you brought into it with all of the stories, and it made me feel like I was there rocking along in your car alongside you some of the
Thank
time.
you.
So thank you. Thank you also for that. Now we have a few questions that have come in, but I would like to, well, use or abuse my position as moderator with the first question. I am really interested, Steve, in hearing a little bit more about, coming from the academic side, but also being so aware of the protocols and the ways in which you needed to engage with your kin, your mob. Um, what was the ethics process like for you? And we're talking university ethics, certainly, because I know from doing my own PhD that was a bit of a headache, but
Mm.
also navigating the community side and your family side and of the ethics. Did they mesh well? Were there things that perhaps we can learn in terms of navigating this intersection?
Yeah, good question, Dad. Look, I focused on the process with university solely myself. I didn't bother my mob too much in that space because a lot of it, not everyone wants to know. My mum was alive at the time. She passed away midway through my PhD. She was a big influence. So I would have a lot of yarns with her about little bits and pieces that anything that came up through the ethics process. I did get a letter of support through my family corporation, our native title corporation, which is a community-based corp. And, just to state that they are and were in full support of me, acknowledging me as a Nanda person and that they wanted this to go ahead. And I don't think any of us really understood, like several years on, that there would be a book out of it. No one saw that coming, but any of this has been quite, the whole lot of it, it's just been icing on the cake. But I tried to keep that side of it out of it, the academic side out of it as much as possible because people aren't, they're just too busy. But the community side of it, it was just back and forth and a lot of people yarning and snowballing too, which was really important. I think word of mouth just worked to a treat here with this process because I'd ask mum, hey, who can I talk to? And she'd say, well, go and talk to Yarni down the road there. And I'm like, yep, no worries, that's cool. I can do that. Or go and talk to this one or go and talk to that one. And it saved me a lot of time. But again, you've got to have people who are going to know, and at times too. Like I wouldn't do any research when there was sorry business. And I actually dedicated a chapter of my PhD to it because it was so big. So there were lots going on there, Deb, but I hope I've answered that with that. I tried not to involve them too much on the university side of things. It's too much. It's hard enough for us.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, thank you. You did definitely answer it. We have a couple of other questions which have come in. So the first, as development scholars, we're interested in how what is considered development is shaped by the West. So such a great question, how can communities such as Nanda be supported to articulate their own visions of development?
Yeah, well, see, a lot of this I just put to my family and let them run with it. Like the Nanda Language Day, that was my aunties got involved with that, so they were actually letting the linguists know how they wanted to run it, what day they wanted, what time, how, who was to be there, and all these sorts of things. So that's basically just handing over the reins, I think. And again, that's community engagement and community collaboration. Saved me a lot of legwork too. I don't have all the time and energy to do it, orchestrate and manage all these different aspects of. So I think it's just having some clear communications and some really good people on board, and the rest is pretty straightforward.
Steve, you have just summarized what people have tried to explain about localization and locally led development and all of those different things in such clear and concise manner. Absolutely.
Thank
All
you.
about the process, and that sharing of decision-making power, right? And
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
that's where the magic happens.
Yeah. Look, it made my life so much easier when people were getting behind it, when they knew and they were like wanting to be involved. And that's ownership of, isn't it, really? And that is magic. And I think that goes right across the board, whichever way you look at it.
Yeah.
It's also about letting go too, Deb, and not having that sort of like control with it all. Let people do their thing. They know what they're doing.
Absolutely, they do. So next question. They're rolling in, Steve.
They're rolling in, are they?
They are, they are. How did being a member of the community impact on the expectations that the research? I think we're missing a word here, but how did being a member of the community impact on their expectations around community impacts, etc., the potential impact of the research on community lives? And that's followed up with what lessons can people coming from outside us, outsiders such as communities, apply? I think that you've answered a little bit of that already, but if you want to go any deeper.
What was the first one? Let's break it up because
Sure.
there's two
Yeah.
questions there.
There is. How did being a member of the community impact on the expectations around the potential impact of the research on the community? I hope that I've summarized this correctly.
Um, hmm. For me personally, I was look, obviously because it's a slow burn doing this. It's like while I was doing all of this and we were in lockdown and I had to do all the teaching and different research and writing for grants and all the rest of it, the process, what community were doing was something so totally different. So it had no bearing on me. I mean, I was stressed out. I would have loved to have been there, obviously, but I just let them run with it. So it didn't really interfere with my life in university and what I was doing.
Mm.
Um, if things went pear-shaped, obviously it would have. But no, everything seemed to be rolling on okay. I think for me, it was more like, how can I give back? How can I actually get
Yeah.
my community involved and share this wonderful project with them and be authentic about it and real with it? I think it was just really about that. And the book it's like this PhD started in 2012, I think it was. So the book's just come out in May this year. That's a long time in regards to process, and like the language stuff and small little things actually add up, and it makes community feel like they are a part of something. And I think that's essentially it. For me, it was anyway. And what was the next section?
The second part is what lessons come researchers such as myself coming from outside be able to apply when attempting to work with communities.
Yeah, well, that's another interesting one, isn't it? I mean, obviously, I'm an insider, but I've worked out with other mob in Australia too. So I was always looking at it from that point. Because it's family, it's kind of like a double-bladed sword too, because the expectation can be a bit much at times. And like I've got a cousin brother who's still waiting for a copy of the book here, and I've just got jarred by my uncle over in Perth yesterday or the day before because he's like, "Where's that book for your brother?" And I'm like, "Yes, I've got it coming, but we've got to share the love around." And I gave it to a copy to my sister, so I did have to explain that. So these things happen, and I think you just got to be honest about it. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. And just like from an outsider perspective, doing research, getting involved with community. If you are like doing your PhD, that's a different take again. You can go and do voluntary work with community-based organisations. You can go and help out. You know, we've all got skills, and as we know, community-based orgs, underfunded and over-resourced, they need as much help as they can get. And it's a great way to actually sell yourself, like in that space, get to know who's who in the community and give a little bit back. So you're actually starting that process, in relation to if you're actually um, putting in for a grant as a researcher, include Aboriginal people or Indigenous peoples in the actual project. You can have Aboriginal chief investigators, you can have scholarships, you can have fellowships. There's a whole gamut. Be creative. And I think it's also that, again, being open and flexible and transparent and, sharing. And I think that's pretty much what this is all about.
Such great advice. Thanks, Steve. And just so down to earth, really sort of practical.
Mm.
The next question that we have, in your opinion, what should research institutions such as universities do to recognise and centre Indigenous knowledge and rights in things like research ethics, or I'm going to broaden this, in research more generally?
Mm. Again, including Aboriginal people front and centre. I think it's imperative.
Yeah.
I mean, the days of like just being othered and, objects for study, it's done and dusted. Let's move on from that. I cringe at that sort of thing and doing it. And it's not really hard to do. Like opening up and being honest, particularly if you're community minded, it's not hard. People see it. Mob know. And so I think, and if they're anything like my mob, they'll just tell you straight out, if you're not being genuine. So we know.
Love that, Steve. I was wondering as well if you can talk a little bit, because you do go into this in your book. I love through your yarning, through your storytelling. It is essentially an invitation to move into ways of, and you spoke about this at the beginning of your presentation, ways of knowing, of being, etc., which are relational.
Yes.
And it was just a very sort of natural way of speaking about this different way of moving through the world. So I was, and particularly in terms of research, I was wondering if the extent to which you sort of really took a deep dive yourself in thinking about that epistemology.
Absolutely. For me, like I'd been away for 10 years, away from home, Western Australia for 10 years, Deb. I was up in Darwin studying and working and Alice Springs, and then I came down here to Melbourne, did a master's down here. So there was a lot of years or a decade that I wasn't there, and I'd been traveling and working outside of that anyway. So reconnecting is a big thing, and I had to do that. And it doesn't matter who you are or where you stand in the family, hierarchy. You still have to be genuine and go back and introduce yourself. And that was part of that process when I was invited up to go and when I took my little family back up to Gelton for the barbecue and had the aunties and uncles and cousins and they were really rapt to meet my little crew because I had my littlies. So it was a great reunion and, things just snowballed from there. And a lot of the times, a lot of like my aunties and uncles, seniors, hadn't seen me since I was little anyway. So we had to do a lot of that catching up, and then meeting other family member groups, and whether it's through Sorry Business or through this whole process, it was a constant, and it's a constant all the time anyway. You know, whenever you're working with community, it's you never stop meeting different groups. And as you were saying earlier on, you're going off and doing your thing, and you've got a big mob going with you. So I bet you they're calling you now.
Very true, very true. We're soon going to be going up into the mountains.
So that doesn't change. I think that's just part of parcel.
100%, 100%. And I was wondering as well, you spoke a little bit about it. Well, you spoke quite a bit about it, but when you're talking about yarning, when you're talking about storytelling, you are singing my song. I love it. And one of the things that I love most about it is that unlike other ways of producing knowledge, you're respecting the provenance of stories. You're not decontextualizing them. So I'm wondering if you had anything more that you wanted to speak about in terms of adopting and really centering that methodology.
Yeah. Look, I'm going to frame it like this. I just got back from Perth. My niece has got cancer. I just went back to say goodbye to her. And I'm writing this up as I was doing it on the run. And I could tell reading it that the academic structure, I was struggling with that. But you start talking to me, yarning to me about my family, it's natural. It comes from the heart. It comes from my memory of, and that's gold, and that's authentic. And you can't bullshit about that. You know, it's there, it's real. So, you know, the academy stuff I've always struggled with, like, because it is a construct of, you know, this is the framework that we do things. It doesn't fit with Indigenous groups. We all know that. And when we're working in that space, I know how hard it is for myself. We all get it. So we've got to be flexible and work around this system. And it is really, really hard. It's very challenging.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you. Do we have any other questions which have come in, or? Don't think so at this point. So maybe I will finish off with a question. Feel free to skate over it or go deep, because this is me sort of coming in from the side here. But I noted how you spoke about your use of grey literature, including going back all of the generations documented.
Yeah.
What's been documented very much from the I'm presuming almost entirely from the colonizers' perspective, from the white perspective. So the personal side, skate over it or not, I was wondering how that actually impacted on you, because you're talking your mob, you're talking your family here. But also what the process was for you, like for you as a researcher as well, coming in from your perspective and really privileging the voices of your kin.
Yeah, look, I think the yarns of, like, I grew up with snippets of different stories, different yarns about family and our history. But it wasn't until I've come back into it and doing the research and really drilling deep and finding out, like, different, like my great-great-great-grandfather, he was sent to Rottnest prison for 6 years for killing and spearing 6 sheep and 1 heifer on his country. Traditionally, any animals and food on country belong to us and the people, the traditional owners. So you can imagine what he would be going through. That would just be so foreign, and to be chained up and, you know, taken to Rottnest Island. It's infamous, and a lot of mob never returned from there. He was very fortunate in that he did return, and ironically became a shepherd. So, you know, that's survival. And what an amazing human being, I think, to be, you know, that humble. And I think that just resonates. And it when I was going through all this process of research and finding these reports, and I found a commitment book from Rottnest in the Batty Library, and I'm opening it up and I'm looking, and his name's the date signed in and signatured in the old felt pen, and I think I've got a copy of it somewhere. I was actually going to show you, but maybe that's for another time. But that things like that, it is very moving, because that's my mob, and I've seen pictures and I've heard stories about Rottnest, and then you're going through different policy too, the protectionist era, assimilation, missions, all of these things. And I'm like looking at my mob when I'm going to sorry business, we're in churches and these sorts of things, different denominations. And I'm always thinking about all of that. That hits hard and it hits deep. But you've got to sit with it. And that's part of that research process. I've been told in the past that, this sort of research, if it doesn't break you, nothing will. And it does break you. There's no doubt about it. But time's good. And I also look at all the good things too and try and stay positive. And there's some beautiful things that have come out of it. The language, the book, all sorts of wonderful things. So, I try not to delve too much on the negativity.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Steve. And thank you for your honesty and accepting what was, slightly intrusive question. But fascinating to get your perspective. And I encourage anyone who is either here live on the webinar or looking at the recording, read his book. It's beautiful. You will not be.
There it is somewhere there.
There it is. There it is. You will not be disappointed. Check it out. So thank you, everybody, for accompanying this webinar, and special thanks to Steve. Thank you so much for sharing your research, your journey, and being such a wonderful storyteller, such a wonderful yarner. So good afternoon, everybody.
Thank you very much.